is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Appropriations Committee was quoted in their report as saying, quote, disappointed that an agency dedicated to transparency and accountability was not more forthcoming about how it plans to spend the taxpayer money. It also went on in there to say, quote, in the absence of this fine print, the committee cannot discern what the Consumer Financial Protection Board plans to do, how it will do it, or how much it will cost. Given that your agency is about to open up here in about a week, how do the taxpayers, how do we see what you're going to do and how you're going to do it?
Well, Congressman, we started 5 months before the date that we're supposed to go live, building a website, trying to put as much information out there as possible.
Okay, now on the website, my time is so limited, my apologies.
Sorry.
What I want to get is very specific about the budget that you put forward. In this document, which is just 7 pages, it has just 10 line items. The two biggest line items are full-time permanent positions, followed by personnel benefits. That accounts for about $225 million in expenses. Third item is contractual services, which has a very specific number of $48,907,000. Where is the detail about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it? So how do we find the breakdown of that number and how you're going to organize this agency? Because you've obviously gotten some specificity in the numbers. We're looking for the documents, the transparency, and how you're actually going to do that.
So, Congressman, let me try this at 2 levels, and you tell me if this is helpful, and if it's not, I'll try a different way. The first level is to describe, in a big sense, where we will be spending money in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and if you just think of it like a pie.
I'm worried about the fine print, the details. The Appropriations Committee, this Oversight Committee, we don't have the details of how you're actually going to organize and put this forward. Let me read, for instance, go ahead.
So also, Congressman, and I'm afraid I'm blocking on the name, but every contract issued by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is done, as you would know, through the ordinary competitive process, when appropriate, through procurement.
But in advance of those contracts, for instance, this is directly from the House Appropriations Committee. Unlike other agencies, the Consumer Financial Protection Board does not describe or explain a relationship between its policy objectives and the budgetary resources. Performance measures or goals, significant proposals that affect obligations in the 5 to 10 year period, and their relationship to the current year and budget year, or the budgetary effect of workload, strategic planning, capital planning, or investment in an information technology. How do we get the details of all of this information? You obviously have a top-line number, and that was based on something, but you seem to be hiding the details of how you came up with those numbers.
Congressman, no one's hiding anything. We publish all contracts in, it's not called the Federal Register, there's a special place these are published. But
I'm not talking about the contracts. You have only on your website for consumer. I'm worried about the person who's out, in Albuquerque or in Provo, Utah. How do they find out the makeup of all these numbers and the details? As the Appropriations Committee suggested, they can't see that information. I doubt the public can see it either.
Then they may want to go to www.usaspending.gov. It will list the type of contract, the awardee, and the amount of the contract. They may also want to...
What about all these other items, for instance, not just the contracts, performance measures and goals, budgetary resources, what are these people going to be, where do we find all that information? Because it's not on the website compared to other agencies.
Congressman, we're in the process, for example, of developing our performance metrics. And we are not yet standing up as an agency, but as soon as we are stood up, we are putting as much of this as possible.
So are you saying by next week you're going to have this?
Let me say it this way, Congressman.
You just said you would have it when you stand up, and that's next week. So are you telling me that this will be available next week?
Congressman, I don't want to overpromise because I'm not sure how many things you read. I'm not familiar with the document you're reading from.
You're not familiar with the appropriations report?
Of course, I try to stay up with the appropriations work. I'm not sure what particular paragraphs and lines.
You're going to hand that to you right here. It's the budget justification, which is dramatically different than any other agency moving forward.
I'm sorry, Congressman, is this...
Your document.
This is our document.
Yes.
I think you were reading from something else, sir.
But based on your giving that document to the Appropriations Committee said, unlike other agencies, and it listed out all the other things that we normally see as members of the Oversight Committee, and all of that is absent.
Congressman,
Point of information.
Mr. Chairman, could we get a copy of this document to also look at it so we could understand the questioning?
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll give it.
And could I also ask, is there a request outstanding from the Appropriations Committee
That's my understanding,
for more
yes.
information?
Yes, and I think this committee is also asking for that same sort of transparency.
Congressman, if that's the case, we would be glad to come back. We would be glad to brief you. We would be glad to work with you in order to find something that is adequately transparent both to Congress and to the American people.
I have to yield back. My time has expired, but I would hope that information be on the website for the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Mr. Norton.
Now, Mr. Duffy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Ms. Warren.
Good morning.
I would echo your point that I think all of us here want to see clear prices in regard to lending. We want to make sure that borrowers know the risk of the loan they're taking. I think we'd all agree with you on that point. I think there's other issues that are flaring up here. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I want to go back over, again, what your role is here with the CFPB. Would you, you said you're a political appointee, but would you also agree that you are kind of the acting director of this organization?
No, there are truly two jobs contemplated by the Dodd-Frank bill. One is that there will be a director, and that process is the president will nominate someone, the Senate will confirm. The other is that it's perfectly clear in the Dodd-Frank bill that someone has to get this agency up and running. That is charged to the Secretary of the Treasury, and he has to.
And that's why I'm asking the question, because as the acting director, it's one of these situations where if it walks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it looks like a duck, it's a duck. And you're hiring the staff. You have a welcome video on the website. Your schedule is on the website. And though you might say that you work for the Treasury Secretary, I think anyone who looks at what's happening here, they would agree that you're behaving as if you're the acting secretary. And I think that's the concern here. And I think we come back to this point of we want to see confirmation from the Senate of our acting director. And back to one of your original points, you said, you know what, this agency provides a voice for the American people. I look at this Congress, we are the voice of the American people, and when we don't have any oversight of what you're doing, I see that as incredibly problematic. I guess I would ask your comment on that.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your interest in what's happening during this period between the time that the president signed the bill into law and the time that this agency receives its transferred authorities under the statute. And it says the Secretary of the Treasury shall set the agency up, and that's hiring and signing contracts and building mechanisms.
But the Treasury Secretary isn't on the website. His schedule is not on the website. It's you.
And the Secretary of the Treasury, who is responsible for many things, delegates to other people. And he has delegated to me, he has asked me to come in and spend my time doing this. And I will say, Congressman, it has been a 14-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week
I agree about
job.
14-hour days. I know exactly what you're talking about. But I was talking about, are you acting as the director? Not are you the director? Have you been confirmed?
I am acting as the delegate of the Secretary of the Treasury as the statute contemplates. And
let me move on, because my concern is my duck analogy. It appears that you are the acting director by everything that we're reviewing here. And you're aware that the FTC, the SEC, and the FDIC all have 5-member boards. But the CFPB, we're going to have one director. Possibly you, possibly someone else. I guess that gives me some concern that we're consolidating power in one person and instead of a board. Does that give you any pause or concern?
Well, there are two models in government. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Office of Thrift Supervision, the primary prudential regulators, the safety and soundness regulators that we were talking about earlier, have a single director. And I think the reason for that is the belief that Congress had that having a single director, when you've got someone who's doing banking regulation, makes for a more efficient operation.
But listen, I mean, the FDIC, the SEC, and the FTC are involved in some very important areas, and they're 5-member boards. And they worked well, right?
They certainly are involved in many things. They are not banking examiners.
Would you be opposed? Would you be opposed to a 5-member board?
And they do not run a banking staff.
Would you be opposed to a 5-member board?
What I will say is that this was fully debated.
Let me ask you this. Are you opposed to a 5-member board?
Congress made the decision.
I'm not asking about Congress. I'm asking, are you opposed to a 5-member board?
I think when Congress made that decision, it was the right decision.
So you would say, yeah, you are opposed to a 5-member board. You think a one-person director.
And Congress made the decision to have one regulator.
That leads me to my next point.
It was wise.
As I think you've seen a concern here with my colleagues that there is with what you're doing in regard to consumer protection could trump safety and soundness. And we look at FSOC, and it's a 10-member board where we need a supermajority of 2/3 to overrule your decisions. And you have a seat, the president has a seat, all you need is one more, and we can't overrule the decisions that you made. I yield back, I apologize, my time is up.